Welcome back to the Mackem in the Middle podcast after the last Sunderland League game of the season. That is because Sunderland have finished inside the playoffs with a 3-0 win away to Preston. Of course, some of the results went for us, some of the results went against us, and I'm sure me and Michael will go through how it felt to be there in the crowd when all of it was going on. But like I say, John, we're finishing the playoffs. Something which, 15 months ago, if someone said, we're going to get promoted from League One, we're going to go straight up, we're going to get finished in the playoffs in the Championship on a 9-game unbeaten run, as it is at the minute as well, you'd have just probably blocked them on Twitter thinking they were on some kind of very heavy drug.
Yeah, you would. It's been a long road, back to this, but to even contemplate that we'd be anywhere near the playoffs, especially with, the circumstances, I think is the main thing. We know obviously we've lost the strikers, the manager, a lot of bad injuries, a lot of players obviously unknown and playing their first games in senior football. So to do it, under those circumstances is just a fantastic thing. And like you say, if someone had said to you, sort of after the 6-0 drubbing at Bolton, which, was probably one of the worst days, I think, like you say, you'd have probably laughed at them. But football's a strange thing, and here we are with Sunderland. We don't do things, just coolly and simply. We're either in an absolute relegation battle or we're fighting for the playoffs, and that's the way we do it, and that's where we are. And to be fair, it's like I say, it's a long time coming, and it's really, really good time to be a Sunderland fan at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously it was that defeat against Bolton last season that proved to be the best result of the season last year. And obviously this year there was a similar one again, this time at home against Stoke. We lost 5-1 and we've lost one game since then. Of course, there's been a few results since that game that obviously now don't matter. And you look back and think that was actually quite a good result, a good point. But at the time, there was probably a few games where we thought we had dropped points. But to finish in the top six, Michael, with a newly promoted team, the first team to do so after getting promoted from League One since I think it was Brentford in the 2014-15 season. I think 3 of the last 4 teams that have gone through the playoffs and got promoted have went straight back down the last season. Obviously, you look at the other 2 teams that have got promoted with us, Rotherham and Wigan. Granted, with Wigan had a points deduction, but they've went straight back down. Rotherham, pretty much went to the last game or last couple of games to see if they would stay up or not. It's quite, I'd say, fitting, but it's very not fitting that Sunderland have managed to get the playoffs ultimately on goal difference, which, when I tell you that we haven't had a striker for 75% of the season, is not the way you'd have expected Sunderland to get playoffs.
Definitely not. First and foremost, like you both have said, let's say a massive thank you to Bolton fans, because that 6-0 defeat ultimately proved to be the best thing that happened to us. And again, like you both said, if someone said to me after losing 6-0 at Bolton, we would finish in the playoffs, we go up through the playoffs in League One, then finish in the playoffs in the Championship without a regular focal point anyway, with all the injuries we've had, with Alex Neil going, I'd have said they've been smoking some sort of illegal substance and they need rehab or something. But it's mental. Obviously we'll get into the atmosphere, as you alluded to in your intro, was just insane. But to even come close to getting into the playoffs, to probably finish in the top half, given everything that's happened, would have been an achievement. If we had won 3-0 earlier in the week, and that had been the last game, and we just missed out on the playoffs, I think people would have been obviously disappointed, but there would have still been pride there, because the club's got pride back in the city again. But to finish in the playoffs with the effort that's been put in, and big credit, obviously for Chris Speakman and Harvey. Yes, we know the striker situation. They still should be criticised on that. That's fair. But in general, recruitment's been good. But the big bulk of the credit's got to go to Tony Mowbray and the players, because if you look at the adversity that we've had to put up with constantly, I'll just quickly list them off again. Alex Neil going, which at the time was a big blow. Stewart being out for 80% of the season. Sims being out for a couple of months, as you mentioned, then getting recalled. Corey Evans being out for half the season. Dan Ballard being out for more or less a good few months of the season. Danny Bart has been out. Elliot Embleton's been out. Lyndon Gooch, Luke O'Nien, Adji Elise, Dennis Sirkin. You could probably have a starting 11 of players that have been injured at one point this season for a lengthy period of time. So to get into the top 6, take a bow, every one of you. It's been mental.
Yeah. And just before we get on to the game, obviously against Preston, which was nervous, we'll get on to that exact atmosphere now, Michael, because it was probably the most stressful game I can at least ever remember. Because obviously it's not usual to be watching your phone more than to be watching the game that you've travelled 2.5 hours and paid a lot of money for. But, especially in that second half, and even pretty much since the game kicked off, that was what a lot of people were doing because, Sunderland had to win the game, but that win didn't come to anything if results didn't go our way. And, with Millwall going 3-1 up at one point, obviously Coventry going 1-0 up, it was, very much a case of just checking your phone. Like I say, when Millwall went 3-1 up, it was looking unlikely. And I think that was just about when Sunderland took the lead, I think it was. I could be wrong on that. But as soon as Blackburn scored that second goal, there was just this sense in the crowd that something is going to happen.
There was, and it's weird because going into the game, I was trying to play it down in my head and thinking, if we don't get there, so be it, blah, blah, blah. And look, if we don't win the playoffs, so be it, but hopefully we'll just out-football everyone and win them anyway. But regardless, when Millwall were 3-1 up at half-time, I think Borough had equalised not long before half-time as well. So at half-time, when I saw Millwall were 3-1 up, I thought, right, well, my hope is going to turn to the Middlesbrough game in the hope that they actually attempt to do us a favour and try and beat Coventry, but obviously didn't happen in the end. But in the end, thankfully, it didn't matter. But I thought it was unlikely. I just couldn't see Millwall throwing that away at home. And obviously, that's some collapse from them, to be fair. But yeah, I wanted to go into the last game with the attitude, just win it, because even if you don't make the playoffs, you always want to win the last game and go into the summer on the back of a good mood. But all we could do was win. Like Tony Mowbray said, like the players have said, and as cliched as it sounds, just affect your own destiny. Just win the game and hope it's enough. And thankfully, in the end, it was. But I will say then, to quickly not try and get ahead too much, but the roar, when there was a massive roar in the crowd, and Josh, you'll know it as well, when Blackburn got that fourth goal and they were winning 4-3. Because I think when they got to 3-3, we were probably 2-0 up in the game, I think, at that point.
I think they equalised as we were celebrating the second goal.
But then there you go. That shows drama, doesn't it, for the championship? But yeah, even at 3-3, that was enough. But there was still nervousness because obviously Millwall score again, then they're 4-3 up and it's out of our hands again. So when Blackburn scored the fourth with 5 minutes to go plus added time, there was the sense that, oh shit, we've done it. Like we've actually done it. And yes, that was one of the best away atmospheres I can think of. Nearly 6,000 Sunderland fans celebrating the playoffs at the end of a mental season. But you're right, the atmosphere was insane. Both when Blackburn went ahead, both when we scored, when Blackburn got their winning goal, and especially at full time.
Yeah. On the game that Sunderland were involved in, John, like I said, it was a must-win game because if we didn't win, regardless of results elsewhere, we wouldn't have finished where we have. And the first half was, I want to say, a nervous first half, and it kind of was. But, before we get onto the goals, Sunderland had quite a few chances in the game to, have taken the lead before we actually did. And thankfully, this isn't a case of talking about a referee decision that ended up costing us playoffs. But how we didn't get a penalty in that first half is quite remarkable, I think.
Yeah, it is. Like you say, the first half was a bit, so it was sort of a basketball match, wasn't it? It was sort of end to end. Preston probably were going to try and come out and be up for it, which I think they did, to be fair. But yeah, we played some really good football in the first half and probably should have been, if we'd have taken our chances, probably 2 or 3 nil up if we were, being generous. But yeah, the penalty one, the referee's in a great position. The only thing I could think of is he thinks Geldhart's not in control of the ball. That's the only reason. I don't think that's a basis for not giving a penalty because it's still a foul.
I think when I seen it back as well, I think that was the one thing that I think, is he going to get the ball? And I think I've seen it back 4 or 5 times, and I don't think anyone can be 100% sure that Geldhart doesn't get to that ball because I think there's quite a lot of backspin on it. The ball. There's no one in the world is 100% sure that Geldhart's not going to get on the end of that and stick it in the bottom corner. And I think while there's that doubt as to whether the ball's going to go straight through to the goalkeeper, if you are impeded, it's a foul. And, there's not a there's not a suggestion of a dive or anything because the contact is as clear as day. It's a hard one to say that.
Yeah, it's if you watch most players who sort of round the goalkeeper, and they knock it past the keeper, 9 times out of 10 people don't see, but that ball goes out of play. They're not really going to get to it, and that's still a penalty.
Yeah.
Obviously, we as fans, I think we'd all say it's a stonewall penalty. But obviously, from the referee's point of view, you can see to a degree maybe why he hasn't given it. Not that I'm saying it's not a penalty, because I think it is one. And then you're thinking, oh my God, is this going to ruin our day? But thankfully, the footballing gods that are, Diallo, Clark, and Roberts and those types of players did actually make it so that that decision didn't cost us. It's a bit like the Luke 09 mentality of it's gone, it's done. The West Brom penalty, it's gone, it's done, and we can't affect it. Let's go again, keep at it, and that's what's ultimately got us in the playoffs, I think.
Yeah, and obviously there's a few other missed chances here and there across the game, but second half Michael will make a change, and I thought it was a change just because Mowbray knew we needed to win the game, but it wasn't because Cirkin went off injured. Pritchard came on, and to be honest, I have no idea what formation we ended up playing with, but it looked like, to me at least, that Lyndon Gooch was kind of playing as a left-sided centre-half in a back three, which, was an interesting setup, but as soon as we made that change, the performance just went up tenfold, and we get the first goal approximately 10 minutes into the second half. Good build-up play, passing the ball like we know Sunderland can in between the lines, and it falls to Diallo, who, if it was his last game, thankfully it isn't, but if it was, there would have been no better way to go out than scoring a goal like that.
No, and especially when that was the goal that got us going for the win, wasn't it? You're right. Just to allude what you said there, that's another reason why it sums up why it's mental we're in the playoffs. Lyndon Gooch as a left-sided centre-half. Who could have written it? So it was insane. Yeah, but to be fair, Cirkin did look like he was hobbling a bit at half-time, and I wasn't surprised that he came on, but I thought that the introduction of Pritchard, like you alluded to there, completely changed the game, because the first half was edgy. It was a bit nervous. We were allowing Preston a bit too much respect. I think they were getting in our faces. And don't get me wrong, they wanted to, of course, end the season on a high in front of their own fans. But, they obviously had a good chance. The chance with Liam Delap in the first half that should have been 1-0, and thankfully was a turning point, and that didn't go in. But as soon as Pritchard came on, our intensity went up a notch. Our passing ability went up a notch. Our team cohesion went up a notch. We were able to start to get the ball around and demonstrate basically why we are a better footballing side than Preston. And even at half time, I said to one of my friends in the away end that if we get the first goal, we beat these, and possibly beat them comfortably, because all Preston were trying to do was just trying to foul everybody and trying to be dirty little gits. So to get the first goal meant that we could then have the license to go on like we did. But Pritchard coming on was extremely instrumental in that.
And it wasn't long after the first goal went in that Sunderland then doubled their lead. But just to mention before that, I don't know if you actually saw it either on the stream or from where you were sat either, Michael, but Pritchard coming over to the away fans after that Diallo goal, frantically trying to ask people what the scores were. It was a very interesting thing to happen, but it was 6 or 7 minutes later that Sunderland doubled the lead, and it was Pritchard who got the goal, who should have scored a couple of minutes earlier. I can't remember who it was that played the ball into him, but he puts it through the legs of the defender. He's still on goal inside the box. A little just tap into the bottom corner, and it's probably 2-0 at that time. And for a good 30 or 40 seconds, I thought that was going to be a massive missed opportunity, but it wasn't, because we get the ball back up their end of the pitch. The ball falls to Pritchard on the left-hand side, and I thought it took a deflection at the time, but it didn't. He just reversed the ball into the far corner, John, and 2-0. Pretty much job done for Sunderland. And like I say, that was around the same time when Blackburn got the equaliser, and it was written in the stars, and everything just kind of aligned for this to be the day that everyone wanted it to be.
Yes, 100%. I think you've got to praise, Tony Mowbray. It would have been easy to bring off, Cirkin and put on Joe Anderson. But these players are, incredibly versatile. We've just spoke about Gooch obviously playing, all across the back four or three, whatever way you want to put it. So to put Pritchard on, was, very, very brave. And that's the sort of thing that Tony Mowbray is doing. And to be fair, I thought Pritchard probably did control the game himself. And we know he's got that ability. Yes, just before I think we did score, I think he should have scored. But, the goal is just, it is class. I think it's up there with both the other goals. I don't think it's less quality in any way. Just everyone's going the other way, and I'm thinking, he just slips it into Roberts. Everyone's gone the other way. Goalkeeper doesn't even move, and literally just dink into the far corner. It's just how many seasons have we just scored scrappy goals, and now we just sometimes you take for granted the goals we do score, because then you go back and you think, I didn't even know how good the build-up was. We put sort of 10, 15 passes together and tore a team to shreds. Like, you don't think that until you relive them back. The second goal obviously kills Preston. They were given as good as they got, up until that point. But yeah, the second goal obviously kills them. Love Pritchard going to the fans and asking what scores are, because again, that's none of the youngsters are probably going to do that. The experienced one is going to do that, because if they say it's going all right, then we know to control the game and just slow it down. And obviously that's what we saw after Clark scored. It's just right, control the game. We can just see this out, and hopefully, one of the other results does actually, eventually go for us.
Yeah, and again, at 2-0, Sunderland weren't finished, Michael, because 4 minutes later they made it 3-0. And if it wasn't job done at 2-0, it certainly was at 3-0. And again, just a very, very good team goal from Sunderland. I think it starts with Preston on the attack. Hume wins the ball back. Dan Neil, little flick around the corner, it's into Gelhardt. Gelhardt through to Clark, and Clark does what he does best and has done it so many times this season, 11 times in the league to be precise. Cut in on his right, even though he's doubled down on by the Preston defenders. Put it in the bottom corner, and to score 3 goals in what I think was 11 minutes away from home, but last game of the season against Preston, results are, a result is somewhat going for you at that time, as it was still 3-3 when we scored the third. Just incredible, really.
Incredible alignment of fate, really, wasn't it? It just seemed like for once that stars were going well. To be fair, and I think it was a point that Kyle made to refer back to the Watford podcast, where he said about all the results in recent weeks almost going too well for Sunderland, and that was that was the main reason why I was still nervous even when we went 3-0 up, because I just thought, it's going to be 4-3 Millwall, isn't it? It's just going to come to a head on the last day.
Yeah.
But again, we weren't to know that at the time. All we could do was affect our own performance. But like John said, even the build, the through ball from Gelhardt to Clark, I think, was sublime. In the build up to his goal. And again, we do seem to take for granted that we do score some good goals. Like even the goal at Reading, the non-official proper EFL goal of the season, by the way. But that goal, I didn't appreciate watching that live, how good that was. And again, it's the same with a couple of the goals here. We're just so good at keeping the ball, just controlling the tempo, not rushing it, not being guilty of trying to force opportunities that aren't there. And when we do get the opportunities, we're just so good at cutting teams open. And like you said, what was it, 3 goals in 12 minutes, 11 minutes?
Yeah.
Away from home. That's probably the first time I've seen Sunderland score 3 goals away from home in quick succession like that. And like you said, you could tell that even as soon as the second, like John said, the second one started to kill Preston off, and the third one, by then it was done. Like from then, for the rest of the game, it was a training exercise, really, wasn't it? And we just didn't have to get out of second gear. And like I said, it's just funny, Pritchard trying to get the fans to tell him the score. And yet it's funny with Mowbray when he said in his interview after the game he didn't want to know the score. But I mean, come on, even if you didn't want to know the scores on the day, it would have been impossible for you not to have found out. There was a number of people that would have been checking phones every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But yes,
even the players on the bench, I imagine, would have been checking them.
Sorry?
Even the players on the bench, I would imagine, were checking them.
Probably, yes. I mean, even Mowbray's coaching staff, I think probably Mike Dodds and all that, Michael Proctor would have probably been checking the scores. But Preston, can I just say, sort your internet signal out, by the way, because when I kept on trying to refresh my phone to look at the scores, it just wasn't having any of it. Although that was probably because multiple people were using their phones at the same time. But still,
6,000 to be precise.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's a small amount of people, isn't it? So, but still, it was great, And even, again, like I said to you before, the roar when Blackburn scored the third, and you always get some, excuse my language, you get some dickheads in the away end that try to spread the news that someone apparently said in elsewhere in the away end that Borough had went 2-1 up.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they were referring to a goal they
Well,
had. That
there was one time as well that someone said Blackburn had scored a fifth as well, which I don't know if
I don't get why people do that. Like,
I don't know unless it got disallowed. I don't know, but
now unless you think it's funny to mess with people's hopes and emotions, then I don't know. But either way, look, it didn't matter in the end. When the Stars did align and Blackburn were winning and we were comfortably keeping the ball, it was just a beautiful atmosphere to be a part of.
It was. And because of that, Blackburn in their game scored what ended up being the winning goal in the 86th minute, John, which I think was about 3 or 4 minutes before, obviously, that time in our game. So there was about 10 minutes left in our game when Blackburn scored. And, you know, I've watched it back on Sky just because of what it was. And, you know, the people in the crowd know of the score before anyone at Sky does. And the cameras just pan to the crowd. Everyone's celebrating. There's just a lot of noise coming from the away end. On Sky, they announced that Blackburn have scored, and that is when people fully realise that, you know, Sunderland have done it, because obviously Millwall would have had to have scored twice in the last couple of minutes. And yeah, that's it. Everything just kind of aligned for this to be for Sunderland. And, you know, we'll get onto the playoffs shortly, but, you know, if you look at how we got relegated, back-to-back relegations, one of the worst championship seasons anyone could ever imagine. We finish in League One. We get promoted through the playoffs after going on an unbeaten streak of, you know, 14, I think it was, in League One. End up winning the playoffs, having finished 5th. We get promoted. End up finishing top 6 in the Championship, one of the best Championship seasons people could imagine in terms of enjoyment. Finishing above teams on goal difference, having not had a striker for, you know, like I said earlier, 3/4 of the season. Everything just seems perfect, and possibly too perfect at the minute.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and it's like you're driving down the road and all the traffic lights go green. You're thinking, hang on a minute, what's happened here? You know, like Michael was saying, you know, the results recently of most of them have just gone our way, and you know we're almost out of it. And then obviously, you know, Patrick Roberts digs one out in the top corner, and like you say, things just, you know, Millwall are 3-1 up, and you're thinking, oh, you know, we've done our bit. You know, we need a favour from somewhere, and then, you know, out of nowhere, it just happens, and it does make you believe, and it's just momentum, you know, and positive momentum, and it's the sort of thing, you know, that, you know, when Leicester won the Premier League, it was just that, well, we'll do it. We just got that momentum going. It's very hard to stop once it starts, and that's why you find a lot of teams in the playoffs, the ones going in on form, are the ones who normally do the business. Like Michael was saying, you know, if we don't win in the playoffs, that's we've still got to take our hats off and say, you know, it's been a fantastic season. But you know, if it does happen, it's like I say,
you've got to go for it, haven't you? While you're here, you've got to go for it. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, you can't choose. You know, we're looking at, you know, the way MK Dons finished the season, I think, and you know they're playing in League Two now. You know, Rotherham and Wigan were better than us over 46 games in League One. You know, and they're, you know, obviously Wigan have gone down, and Rotherham have just about stayed up, and obviously then you look where we are. It's, you know, when you get, we do talk about it. You know, ours is a big ship that needed turning, and it's taken a lot of years to turn. But once you get it turned, and you get real plans in place, like we say, credit to, you know, the people above at the club and the coaches, and obviously the players we brought in. If you get it turned, like we say, momentum is a really, really hard thing. Either way, you know, if it's going bad, it can go. We know how bad it can get, and good, it can be the best thing in the world. And those are the things that obviously now we're holding on to. You know, would Alex Neil have got us in the playoffs? I'm not so sure he would have done. You know, so it again is that, you know, Mowbray coming in, is that one of those another moments of, you know, right place, right time, and it's just worked.
Just to add on to that very quickly, but one of the points that everyone makes is when, like John said, when momentum's good, it's hard to stop. And I remember, I think with Sunderland, it's a case of Sunderland is such a big club that if we start to get going, we're very, very difficult to stop. And I think it's okay. The rise has been a bit meteoric in that we finished in the top 6 when we didn't expect to, and I think hardly anyone expected it at the start of the season. But the fact that we've got this momentum, and to be fair, we're not the only team going into the playoffs with momentum. Coventry have lost one in like 16, I think it is. And Luton, I think, are unbeaten in 14, although I'd imagine a few of them would have been draws. But still, we're coming at how often, often it's the team that sneaks in good form. Sometimes it's the team that sneaks into the playoffs on good form at the back end at the right time that could have the momentum to get promoted. Whether it happens or not, I don't know, but hopefully it does.
Yeah. And obviously a penny for the thoughts of Millwall fans who, 3-1 up have done their job essentially at half-time and end up losing the game, but also for Blackburn fans who have had to come from behind, from 3-1 down, to win the game, to finish behind on goal difference, to a manager that they sacked last season, I think it was, for failing to get them in the playoffs. Very interesting scenario.
No, it's mad, isn't it? But there's two other things to point out. There's two last-minute goals that we can now point to and look at as massive. The last-minute winner against Blackburn on Boxing Day with Ellis Sims, and Dennis Serkin's header at Millwall. Because imagine if all the other results gone the way they did, and at Blackburn especially, if they get a point at our place,
Patrick Roberts equaliser at Watford as well.
Day, I was going to say, if Blackburn get a point at our place on Boxing Day, they're in the playoffs. Sorry, what'd you say?
The Patrick Roberts one against Watford as well, which at the time seemed like a missed opportunity, but now is the biggest massive, point of the season, really.
It's the point that it's a point that's helped get us in there. And yes, we've conceded a few last-minute goals like QPR, Bristol City, and Hull at home, but we've scored a fair few crucial goals at times. Again, Sims last minute injury time winner. Dennis Serkin last 10 minutes when he even got concussion, getting us a point at Millwall. Couldn't write that either. And then obviously Patrick Roberts, completed the comeback from 2-0 down against Watford. Without that point against Watford, we couldn't have finished in the top 6.
Yeah. Well, just before we look at the playoffs and the semi-final and whatnot, 3 of the best. Starting with you, John.
I think I'm going to have to go Berriton Diaz first. I thought he was quality. Some excellent finishing, and obviously he's a secret Mackem, so he goes first on my list. Second one, I'd probably have to go for Pierre Ekwa.
Bradley Woodman for letting in 3 goals.
Yeah, Pierre Ekwa, who was, he's just getting better and better. I think there's been a lot of people writing him off. I think he did start off relatively ropey, but that's going to be a given. But yeah, yesterday, on Monday, he was fantastic. And then the third one, I'll probably go for Pritchard. I think he could change the game, controlled the game, and just showed his quality. Just needed to see a bit more of it.
Yeah, Michael, for you.
Oh, well, should I put Freddie Woodman in this? No, I'll try and be serious. Right, third, I would go for Jack Clark. I think Jack Clark rounded off the scoring really, really well, but also he just terrorised their fullbacks and terrorised them all day. I mean, you could put Amad Diallo in that list, to be fair, as well. The link-up play in general was just really good, but I'd go Jack Clark personally.
Just to add on Jack Clark, not many players would attempt an overhead kick, 1 yard off their own goal line. So
and especially not a forward player either in the box. But anyway, Jack Clark for me would be third. Second for me would be Pierre Ekwa. I mean, he was a machine in midfield. And look, John's right. He did start a bit ropey and obviously gave away that penalty against Hull. But thankfully, in the end, it doesn't matter. But the good thing is Mowbray stuck with him. We've persisted with him. And yes, you'll still have areas of his game he needs to iron out. But as he gets more used to senior football, I think we'll see why West Ham fans wanted him to have a spell in the first team. And for me, the main one was Alex Pritchard, because I just think him coming on was what changed the game and started to get us a few yards further up, started to get Preston a few yards further back, and gave us the impetus once we did go ahead to. And I think he was an architect in that. He came on, and as you said, Josh, earlier, that it's no coincidence he came on at halftime and the performance level just improved massively. So yeah, that would be my 3.
Yeah. Well, Luton is the team that we have in the semi-final. Home leg first, away leg second, which is usually not what people prefer. You finish third and fourth, you get the home leg as the second leg, technically as the deciding leg, which in theory benefits teams because you know what you have to do. You've got the backing of the home crowd, and it helps. But in terms of Sunderland, who I was looking at yesterday, I think were 4th in the league table for away form and 16th in the league table for home form. Having the second leg away from home, John, benefits Sunderland more than it probably does Luton having it at home.
Yeah, probably. I was saying just before obviously we started, I'd like to, get a good result at home. But obviously then Michael rightly pointed out, to be fair, we're fantastic away from home. So maybe even if it doesn't go as well as we want to on Saturday, we know that we can go away and, we normally do turn up away from home. So like you say, that I think that could work in our favour. I think Luton will probably come up here and just want to sit in, which might help us, I think. And then obviously we can go to their place and hopefully there's a job to be done, and I don't really see any reason why we can't do it.
Yeah, and I think obviously football can happen anyway, but I think, Michael, as long as Sunderland avoid defeat in the home leg, if you win 2-3-0, fantastic. But as long as you avoid defeat in the home leg, given our home form, given the pressure that's on it, given the fact, like John says there, Luton will probably be aiming just to do the same thing. We'll turn up to the Stadium of Light, probably, sit a little bit further back than they would, for a standard away game, and certainly for the home leg. If Sunderland avoid defeat at the minimum, it gives them a good chance of doing it away from home at Luton. Obviously, you can look at the past results, and I think the last 4 games between the two clubs have finished 1-1. Going into the playoffs, Luton, Sunderland, I think, are the two informed teams. Obviously, Sunderland unbeaten in 9, Luton unbeaten in 14, I think it is, possibly 16, one of the two. So, realistically, I think, obviously, it's a very bold statement to make, but I think the winner of this possibly goes on to win the playoffs, given the form. And obviously, to an extent, form does go out the window in the playoffs because it's a lottery, it's a one-off game. You can win the last 20 games. If you don't turn up on that day, your whole season's ended. But momentum is such a important factor in football, and especially in the playoffs.
It's a powerful factor in football, especially with playoffs, because essentially the playoffs is just a mini tournament, isn't it? It's a mini knockout tournament to try and get promotion to the next level, and in this case, get promotion to the Premier League. If I was to slightly counter, because like I said, and like John built on the point I was making, that we are, like you guys said, we're 4th in the table away from home, if that's right, and 16th at home. Luton, I believe, is 2nd away from home. So I'm interested to see how they approach the home leg on Saturday. But I do have more of an inkling that they will sit in and try to be frustrating us, because, okay, the playoffs is a bigger contest than, say, the league game at the Stadium of Light. But I'm sure that game, Luton mainly sat in to contain us and to sort of stop us playing. And to be fair, that's probably a compliment to Sunderland, because of how good we are going forward. Teams are starting to realise, hang on, we have to sit in a bit further here, because if we press them too much, we can literally just pass it round them, and within 3 passes, we're through on goal for them. Through on their goal, rather. But you're right, momentum is such a big thing. And Luton have obviously a very solid... It's contrasting styles, really, isn't it? Because Luton are very direct, physical, aggressive, and are very, very solid on the whole. They know exactly what they're doing. But on the footballing term, if we can play, if the games facilitate playing football, I think we could really beat them. So it's a tough one for me to call. But I think they could beat us over 2 legs. I could see it. But I also think, if, like you said, if we avoid defeat on Saturday, then I'd maybe fancy us at Kenilworth Road to go and get the job done. So for me, a lot of it hinges on the first leg. I mean, don't get me wrong, like John said, we haven't won anywhere near enough home games this season. If we win on Saturday, then I think it's only 8 wins in 24 at home, which is still pretty poor. But get a win. Just go out in front of the fans and get a victory, and hopefully the atmosphere will be rocking at the weekend.
Hopefully so. But just as a last point to make, predictions for that home leg, John, which I'd say is on Saturday, and I think it's a 5:30 kick-off as well.
You are correct, it is.
It is.
Yeah, obviously I'll back my team all the way. I think it's going to be a real tight game. I don't think the first legs are ever, barring an absolute collapse like us against Lincoln. Probably go, just maybe nick it 1-0. But like I say every week, I will take a win, whatever way, even, Thierry Henry handball, we'll take one of them, whatever, just win the game.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting game, though, isn't it, Michael? Because, like John says there, the first legs are not the deciding game of the two, because you can lose 6-0 in the first leg and win 7-0 in the second leg, in theory. But, it is having something to hold on to for the second leg for either team, whether it's a lead or even a 1-goal deficit or a draw, it's so important at this stage, because if Luton come here and win 2-0, they know exactly what they're gonna do in the home leg, and that's exactly what they should do. It's exactly what any team should do. They're gonna sit back, they're gonna defend, they're gonna try and catch us on the break, because they know that we have to come out, because if we don't come out and try and attack them, our season's finished. So it's going to be I imagine a very cagey game, a very, I think the first 15-20 minutes will be very similar to a few of the games we've had towards the back end of the season, knowing that a win would take us X, Y, and Z in the table, where, you start to see them mistakes creeping in, or a bit of, sloppy passing, a bit of, defensive mishaps and whatnot. And that's probably going to be both teams, because of how important it is to try and get that advantage in the first leg.
It's a psychological thing, isn't it? Because the mentalities are, like we said, how momentum's a powerful factor. I think psychology is a huge thing on this. So it's one where, this is why I think if we lost by a 1-goal deficit, I could see us going to Kenilworth Road. I'm more confident of winning the second leg than I am the first one, which is really, really weird, because usually you would think it would be the other way around. But again, it's one of those where if we don't give anything silly away, and contain Luton, because I can't imagine, put it this way, if we played Borough, for example, over 2 games, I think Borough would be more adventurous than what I can see, certainly at the Stadium of Lights, than what I can see Luton being. And I think it's one where Sunderland, in some senses, would have more joy playing against Borough, but I think we'd struggle to contain their attack over 180 minutes, potentially 210 in penalties. But with Luton, it's a weird one. But yes, I think... I'll give you a prediction straight away. I think it'll be a 1-1 draw. I'm going to call it now. 1-1 draw first leg, and I think we'll win 2-1 in the second leg. I've just got that feeling in my gut that it'll be very tight, it'll be very cagey. And by the way, I'm going to say that if we win at Kenilworth Road 2-1, it'll be like a golden last 15 minutes, because we're Sunderland. We don't do things the easy or conventional way. But yeah, I'm going to be very fascinated to see how tactically both teams set out about the weekend, because you're right, you don't want to be the team or to be the player that makes a mistake, will you? So if I'm right, it'll be all to play for in the second leg. But I would if I was offered a draw now, I'd probably take it. With our home form. Yeah,
but that is, of course, on Saturday. We'll get a podcast out straight away after that on the Sunday to talk about the first leg, look ahead to the second leg, a podcast after the second leg to discuss the second leg, and hopefully
preview the final.
Hopefully. And hopefully it's a preview for Sunderland and not a Luton Coventry.
Yes.
But yeah, that's on Saturday. We'll get a podcast out on the Sunday to discuss it. But until then, we will see you later.
That's all, folks.